forward.
Carmen? I seem to have lost audio here.
All right, I think I got some issues with my connection. Were you able to listen my introduction?
I did hear your introduction,
All right.
and then all of a sudden,
so I think I will finish and then I'll let you.
That's fine.
All right, so just give me some time. All right, as I was saying, among his recent notable publications are the Handbook of Multilingual TESOL in Practice and Policy Development in TESOL and Multilingualism, Past, Present, and the Way Forward, which he co-edited alongside Kashif Raza and Christine Kam. In recognition of his exceptional service to TESOL, Dr. Reynolds was honored with the prestigious James E. Aladis Award by the TESOL International Association in 2023. Once more, I extend a sincere and warm welcome to each of you. Let us approach this conference with minds receptive and to new ideas and hearts open to collaboration as we collectively navigate the ever-evolving landscape of English language education. And now, without further ado, I hand over the stage to Dr. Reynolds. The floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Carmen. Yeah, it's a very generous introduction, and I really want to say how much I'm enjoying being able to participate in this conference and have a chance not only to share some ideas that have been on my mind with you all, but hopefully to have a chance to listen to what's on your mind. And let me say from the outset that I've tried to plan this session as a workshop. And so it is one that I hope we can make it more interactive. So it's not just me talking at you, but it's a chance for us to dialogue and think. And as I said in the description of the workshop, play around. The title of the workshop is Generative AI for the Classroom. And there is a handout, and I'm going to share the URL for it in the chat. And I'm going to share it, hopefully, get as well. So, Carmen, can you tell me, can you see? Yes, it looks like you can see the screen. You can type in the URL for the handout. It's a tinyurl.com/GenAI workshop-Friday. You can scan the QR code. And I hope that this will be a useful resource for you. It'll also be something that'll sort of structure the work that we do over the next hour here. And if at any time something's confusing or you've got a question, you can put it into the chat. I do have the chat window open. I'll be able to see that. And I've also got some other Google Docs where you can type in answers, and hopefully we can sort of crowdsource what people are thinking and interested in here. So you can see here on the Google Doc that here's my plan for the hour, which is that I want us to sort of think about what is it we want to know about generative AI for the classroom? What are our questions? I will start by just sharing a little bit of information that I've learned as I prepared for this workshop with you. What are some of the common tools? How what's a framework for how these tools are being used in education? Okay. And then the bulk of the workshop, I hope, we will have a time for you to look at an example of something that ChatGPT can do, and you'll have a chance to critique that example and think how you might adapt it there. So if we start by just what do we want to get out of this session here? All right. The first is just, so I came up with 3 questions. And if you want to see how you're doing, I want you to go ahead and while I'm talking about these 3 questions, click on this link here, which goes to a Jamboard. And when you get to the Jamboard, you'll be able to add a sticky note using the menu on the left-hand side of your screen for a question you'd like to explore in the next hour. But the 3 questions that I came up with are, what kinds of tools exist currently? And what does it mean to interact with a tool, right? Second area, what's a framework for how generative AI tools can be used in education, right? What are the applications, the potential applications that people see? How does that fit into what I have to do on Monday morning? And then thirdly, what's probably on many of our minds is simply, how can we create a classroom activity using it? And what are the challenges going to be, right? It's not necessarily going to be perfectly easy, okay? Let me see if any of you have started adding a question to the Jamboard. Okay? Not yet, but Anonymous Alligator's in. If you want to add a question, see right over here where it says sticky note, just click on that. You can type one like, so how it will make my job easier, okay? You can do that. And all of a sudden, now we've got a sticky note on there. Got a few people that are in, all right? And again, you should be able to get to this page, right? From the link right here where it says, click on this Jamboard, all right? And if you can't get to the Jamboard, feel free to just put your question into the chat, right? What would you like to learn from this session? Got a few more people that are in. I always love the avatars that Google creates. Anonymous Dumbo Octopus, Anonymous Squirrel. These are great. And again, if you want to put a question in the chat, that's fine as well. Give people just about 1 more minute, and then I'm going to keep going here. Okay. Let me start just some of what I want to share with you, which is, first of all, when we think about AI tools, they do come in different forms and formats, right? And there actually is a huge number out there.
What would you do without me? Y ahora, ¿cómo hago esto? I will be dead. Don't say that.
Okay. But they're generative AI tools that essentially are like ChatGPT. If you were able to join the plenary yesterday, you saw some examples of interaction between ChatGPT and myself. And there are a number of other AI tools that operate similarly, right? That are primarily text-based, and what they're able to generate is a text. One neat one that I've come across is one called humata.ai. What's interesting about it is you can upload a PDF file that might be a reading, and it's been particularly designed for students and scholars who would like to get a summary of something that they're reading, right? And so you can upload a PDF file to it, and it immediately produces a summary of the text, and even will generate some comprehension questions about that text. There also are image generators. This can be nice if you want to add some illustrations, for example, to slides that you're doing. Probably one that people are most familiar about is the DAL-E2, right? The DAL-E2, and that's because it's owned by the same company that owns ChatGPT. But there's another one that's a good one, Stable Diffusion. What I like about Stable Diffusion is it's free. And if you'd like even more information about them, and really beginning to see how many are out there, I found another list, which is produced by a company called AI Fire, where they list what they think of as the most popular AI tools. And it's really a huge list out there. So, and it's not something that we could go through, but I encourage you to just start clicking around and trying some of them out, right? I think the best way to learn how to use these things in your classroom is to play around with them. Now, as we begin to think about how does this fit into the work that we do every day as educators, I do believe it's useful to have a framework, right? And to realize that actually the tools go far beyond what I'm going to be demonstrating and sort of having you play with today. And I found what I felt was a very useful framework in a document that's been authored by the European Commission. The focus of the document is actually ethical guidelines for using them. And I know a lot of us have ethical concerns. I encourage you to check out the full report and the discussion that it provides about these ethical concerns. But as part of the report, there's a section where it says, here's the way that these tools fit into education. The first idea that it suggests is that AI tools actually, in a sense, can be teachers of students. Of course, that's probably one of the roles that is scariest to many of us, because this is the headline we see all the time. Will AI take away jobs? Will it take away our jobs as a teacher? Well, I don't think we're there yet, but I do think that the tools supplement and can supplement what we do. They add to what we do. And so examples of this might be an intelligent tutoring system, right? Where the tool actually provides sort of individualized instruction. So the student may produce, right? Or, so essentially the tool will ask the student to do something. The student responds to the task, and then the tool evaluates the student's response and then gives it a second task that, in a sense, is tailor-made to their response. And this is done without a teacher, right? It's an automatic sequence. Sometimes this is more of a sort of a dialogue-based tutoring system where the tutor is also encouraging the student because they say, wait a minute, you haven't answered yet. Any of you that have used Duolingo, that would be an example of this more dialogue-based tutoring system. And clearly there are lots of applications out there that allow students to practice. They're ones that can be integrated into classrooms or not. Potentially even dictionaries or automated feedback on pronunciation, comprehension, fluency, these kinds of things. So these are apps that, in a sense, act as a teacher. I think what the role that we are most likely to use, and the one that I want to focus on today, is using AI not to be the teacher, but rather to support student learning. In other words, as part of our classroom. And we'll see examples where they can create, in a sense, help to create materials, or, as it's phrased here, a learning environment, right? And because they're interactive, there's a possibility for students to, if we're asking students to do something on the tool, then it can become a much more individualized pathway for the student, in a sense. There's also interesting uses where students can input their writing and the tools can actually provide formative writing assessment, right? I think yesterday, Paul Matsuda mentioned this particular possibility for use in L2 writing classes. And then finally, the other thing that is a way in which teachers may use them is that if we're inputting multiple samples or examples of student work, the AI can actually look at those samples and begin to sort the students into groups and say, maybe it would be good to mix these particular students based upon their work, right? Because the AI has the ability to analyze and make judgments about what we input, okay? And it's an interesting possibility there. The report goes on to identify actually two more ways in which AI supports education. The first is that it can actually be used to score essays. If we provide a rubric, say, here's my rubric, please use it to evaluate student writing. This is something I think we have to be very careful about. And I would encourage anybody that goes this route to check it very carefully. We might use AI to monitor discussion posts, for example, and even to analyze what's going on in those posts. And you can see a couple of other uses here, teaching assistants, or even recommend particular activities that might be good if students have a preference or for a topic or something like that. Okay. And then finally, you've got descriptions of ways in which schools or educational systems might use these tools. Okay. So final part of the sort of here, I want to show you that it's here, is you'll see that I've just provided some links to reports that you can come back to later. If you're interested in this topic, read. Often there these reports are both a discussion of kind of the capabilities of the technology, how does the technology work, and then some just ideas about potential applications, right? And I think that really talks about where we are with this topic right now. It is still a very new topic. I don't in any way consider myself an expert on it. And I've actually have been fairly nervous putting together this workshop because I said, you know, how much do I really know? But I think we're at a point where how much do any of us really know and understand about both how this works and its potential. So I do encourage you to read. I encourage you to be critical, but also imaginative here in terms of the technology. Okay, I'm going to paste one more time into the chat just in case there are people who have come late and are wondering what is this document that I got that I'm sharing here on the screen. So I just pasted the URL again. And the reason is so that hopefully everybody will be here and can get to this section of the document that's titled Supporting Student Learning. What could we do? Okay. What are some ideas? And when I put together the abstract, I imagined sort of 4 types of activities that came to my mind fairly immediate. One is that as a language teacher, I know that I always need examples to show students. I need models of language. I do this a lot, and I give students a model, I have them analyze it, I have them characterize it, and tell me then what have they, what patterns do they see in the model? I also sometimes share with them templates, right? So I think that's an important function that I'd like some help with. The second thing I'd like some help with is that I also like using authentic texts with students. But I know that authentic texts, in contrast to, for example, graded readers, don't control for vocabulary, right? Or they may be really good examples of one thing, but then they've got this section that is going to be beyond what my students can understand, right? Or the overall length of the text is simply too long, right? And so I need ways to, in a sense, scaffold and make that text accessible to my learners, right? And so I'm wondering if AI can help me with that. Third area is that I'm a writing teacher, right? And I have a lot of students. I like to give lots of feedback, but I don't always have time to give lots of feedback. And so I'm wondering, what kind of feedback does ChatGPT give? What can it do? How does it handle things like grammar? How does it talk about writing? Yeah. And then finally, I'm really intrigued by this function where I can, in a sense, input information or data to the tool and it can analyze it. It can summarize not just what is the text saying, but it can quantify things going on. It can identify patterns. It may be able to point out things that I don't see. All right. So I'm wondering, how do we do that? And what I'm going to ask you to do in a second is to pick one of these 4 areas. And so I'd encourage you to start thinking about which one of these 4 might be most useful to you, all right? And I've got an activity for you to work on based on which one you choose. Before or while you're kind of thinking which one do you want to go to, and you can go ahead and start clicking in the document and it'll take you there. I want to just point out or share this with you, which is something else I found on the AI Fire website, and I thought it was really useful and worth sharing. And maybe we'll teach you a new vocabulary term, which is prompt engineering, right? And so one of the things that effective users of these AI tools know how to do is to engineer good prompts, right? And AI Fire suggests the following acronym, which is the CREATE formula. They suggest that when you enter a prompt, that you be very clear about who the AI is supposed to be, right? You ask them to play a character. Similarly, you're very specific about the request. What do you need? I need you to write a sales email for a sports car, right? Not a sales email, but a sales email for a sports car. Or a even better, compelling email for the Cougar Hypersport, an electric car with top-tier acceleration, right? The more specific, the more detail you can put into the prompt, the better. You may want to give it some examples. I want it to look like this, and then feed it an example. Be ready, if the response isn't right, to adjust your response. Also, be very clear about the type of output. How long should it be? Should it be an article? Should it be a letter? Should it be a blog post? Right? And then they've got a series of just kind of some examples of extras that you might add to your instructions. So they refer to that as their CREATE formula. I liked that, and I thought I would share it. Okay, I hope by now everybody has had a chance to pick one of these areas, all right? Let me just show you what I want you to do, okay? So for example, I'm gonna pick right now the second one, which is to scaffold comprehension. Click on it, and it takes me to later on in the document. You'll see that it starts with a series of 3 questions. And then it asks me to share an answer to each of those questions on a Google Doc. And so this link right here actually takes me to another Google Doc where you're able to type answers, right? So it's the same questions, but you can type your answers here and it won't mess up this page here. By the way, and then you'll see what I did with ChatGPT. I told it, please write a summary of this article, and then I just pasted in an article. And by the way, you might be really, if you're reading my prompt, you're going to see things like this. You're going to see things like this or this. You say, wait a minute, but what is that? Or sign up for I just did Control-All, Control-C, so I copied everything on a web page and I pasted it in here. And so there's a lot of noise in what I pasted. You'll see when you read further, it's very interesting. ChatGPT handled that noise. It knew what to ignore. and it figured out what was exactly the text of the article and ignored the rest. There. All right. So I'm going to be a little bit quiet, but I welcome people to put any questions, or if I'm not being clear, type your question in the chat, please. Okay. So I'm a little curious, how many of you are working on the first one about creating language models? If you are, raise your hand in chat. Or excuse me, just you can raise your hand in Zoom. Okay. What about the second one on scaffold comprehension of difficult texts? If you're working on that one, raise your hand. Okay, good. Carmen's working on number 2. All right. Providing feedback. Can raise your hand on that one. Dinora. Okay, excellent. Fabiola. Yes. Sounds like an important one. Maybe. How about analyzing data? Okay. See, maybe we can go ahead and start talking. Don't want people to be bored here. I guess it's hard for me to sit here and be quiet. I'm not a good teacher. That's the hardest thing for me as a teacher here. But so the first activity is about using ChatGPT to create a language model. And in order to create this material, I went online and I was looking around for information about what's taught in schools in Honduras. And I found a PDF file that said priorización curricular for the 8th grade. and it was published by the Honduran Education Ministry. And so I looked into it, and I found one of the things that it said is that students need language that is appropriate for this situation right here, right? Daily situations that deal with their age group, right? Use a standard way of speaking. They talk about family relation games, right? Getting and being with friends and potentially shopping, right? And I said, I need a dialogue about 15 lines long, because I'm thinking many of us use dialogues to teach. Anybody want to tell me what your opinion of this dialogue is? I really need, this is where we have to be interactive. So I need somebody who's brave and willing to speak up. Just unmute yourself. Tell me what you think of this dialogue.
I think that it shows like a real conversation that we can have in a daily life. And
Yeah.
seems also that it's providing like context for the students, because it says like at the park with friends. And I think that that can help students to like understand better the conversation.
Yeah, and so I think you can, for me, I had enough to kind of imagine it. So it felt pretty authentic, was there, and it's typical formulas. Hey, Carlos, right? Different greeting, hi. Sofia responds, cool. Carlos uses yeah instead of yes. So each one, if you look at it, almost every line, right, kind of starts with formulaic, informal language. So there's some interesting models there, right? Are there problems with the dialogue? Places where you felt kind of like this is weird? Anybody? I thought it's okay. The one thing that I found a little bit strange is it has so many different topics almost, right? It's talking about an app on a phone, a book report, a sister who borrows my book without asking. It talks about playing soccer. All right, gender roles related to football, right? There, right, it does use the American word soccer, the North American, US word, I should say. Here, and now we're down to food. So there's a whole lot packed in there. It's a little bit longer than 15 lines, but it's okay. All right. What would you do with it? Hopefully somebody out there is an 8th grade teacher. Carmen.
Yeah, I was just reading the prompt, and I think that it provided a lot of like information, and I think the chat tried to tackle each of them. Like, for example, relaciones familiares, which you can see my sister borrowed my book, and then you see soccer, and then I don't know, I think that in there we need to be very careful on what we ask for.
Bingo. I really, really agree with you. I like that. It did what it was told to do. And so I think the problems with the dialogue were caused by me, not by the technology, in a sense, right? And if I had picked just one of those topics, it probably would have given something that could be more useful, right? And this is what they mean by prompt engineering. That you really have to think about what you ask for there. And, it's very easy to revise and go on to something else, right? It's also fun. I mean, this is, many of us have dialogues just like this in a textbook. One of the things that you might do is you might take one of those dialogues from your textbook, put it in and ask it to create a similar dialogue, right? So in other words, then all of a sudden you've got one that's matching and yet it's different. And if you're having students practice, that way maybe they're not all practicing the same exact thing, right? So it can bring some variety into a classroom there. Or you could ask it to follow up with maybe some, what would be key vocabulary words that I should teach in this. Okay? Yeah. So lots of things that we could do with that. Let me jump down now to the second one. I talked about this already, introduced it. This is a long article from the New York Times about a particular butterfly where the female butterfly has a gene that allows it to see color, and the male, they discovered, doesn't have this gene. The male butterfly doesn't see the gene. If you haven't had a chance to look at this yet, you may come back to it later. You can see it's what I pasted in is fairly long. It's messy because it has things that were they were part of an ad in the original text. And when I just copied everything, it pasted stuff like this as well as the actual article. So I asked it to create a simpler version. It cleaned it up very nicely. You can see it's a lot easier to read, I think, this version than what I cut and pasted. But I sort of had the feeling, wait a minute, this is for high school students who are learning English, and it still seems to be too long. I really encourage you to look at this. And now we've got something that is much shorter. Think about whether it gets the key information though. Think about how I explained to you what the text is. Does it pretty much capture what I gave you when I explained about it? And then I asked for comprehension questions, right? So, let me get back up. Comments about this? What did somebody want to share their thoughts about the two versions? Anything you noticed? Has anyone ever created an activity where you have students write a summary and then you have them come back and write a shorter summary? That can be something interesting, right? And then you have them compare the shortest version with the original, right? And one of the nice things about ChatGPT is that you could fairly easily almost create an activity like this, an individual activity for every student in your class, right? If you've got enough articles, all you got to do is paste them in, and in basically about 30 seconds, you'll have a summary. If you say, no, I need it to be shorter, another 30 seconds, and you've got something. Or maybe you just do the first summary, then you ask each student to write a summary of the summary. Then you ask them to exchange it with another student. And the other student's job is to say whether the student's summary adequately captures what was in the original article. Right? We're teaching, again, criticality, evaluation, judgment, and we're having them go over multiple times key vocabulary. Right? So we're building some of that knowledge. Very quickly, let me just show you what the last one is. This is, I pasted in an old essay that I had from many years ago with a student who was extremely bad at spelling, had almost no punctuation. And I asked ChatGPT to make the essay better. It's pretty amazing the way in which it took the text and in fact seems to have understood what the student wanted to say. But, and this is something I was talking about yesterday in the plenary, I think if you look at it, you realize that if the student had pasted this in, right, and then received this and submitted this essay to you, right, as their homework, you would have known something was very wrong. What do we do with that situation? Right? How do we talk about it with the student? How do we also get ChatGPT to provide a more useful feedback? So you can look at that. The last one is an example where I fed in multiple short descriptions of tourism tours. And I ask it to, in a sense, analyze these examples and tell me what are their common characteristics. It did that. I said, wait a minute, and in the end, I asked it even to write a similar description based on that. Okay. I think we're almost out of time. And so I want to stop now. And I'd like everybody to type into the Zoom chat something you're taking away from this session. All right. And it's fine to say I'm more confused than when I started. All right, because I realize it's a lot more complex. Whatever you want to write, but I want you to try and write something into the chat. Okay? By the way, Carmen, I like that suggestion of asking students to identify an audience. I think that's always a really useful activity. I agree. I think none of us know what the future is going to bring. But the other way of looking at it is we never did, right? The future has always been unknown, and that's not going to change. Yeah. I think I hear that comment about ChatGPT making students lazy a lot. I think, we had the example of my student and where it took an essay that's almost incomprehensible and produce something that is beyond what the student could have produced. If the student's allowed to get away with that, then maybe they will become lazy. But I think there's so many things that we can do with it that don't promote laziness, if you will. Yeah, and again, I hope all I'm doing here is just trying to encourage you to play around with the tool. I've been doing that, and every time I do, I'm surprised at what I see. All right. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for us as teachers to be creative. All right. And I hope you'll think of it as something which expands what you're able to do. So feel free to share other ideas. Yeah. Be creative. Use it as a resource. All right. I don't think it's going to replace you. I don't think it's going to be something that students can use to avoid having to learn. Because if they do, they're not going to be able to do the things that we think they can, and it's going to catch up with them. Yeah. It promotes reasoning. I like that comment. Yeah. So, all right. So I think we're at the end of the hour. Carmen, I don't know how we sign off, or if there are final words that you want to share.
Yeah, I'm just going to conclude saying thank you very much, Dr. Reynolds, for such a wonderful presentation. I really enjoy it. And I really like that it was interactive, so we can get to discuss this important topic, which I think we need to be in constant, reading and talking, so we can make the most of it. As you mentioned, we can use this tool to improve our teaching, but also helping students utilize